Good morning, class. Back from the house. I hope everybody's fine. Um, please stay safe. Follow the rules, and I hope that everyone is safe and sound. Um, uh, Here's a shout out to Miss Pierre, to Miss St. Pierre, to Miss Summers, to Giancarlo, to Sophia Riles and Sophia Rempel, to everyone and all. I hope that everyone is safe. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the effects of the Industrial Revolution on politics and culture. And as a result, I'd like to talk about the first kind of political wave after industrialization, and that is the period of revolutions in 1848. In 1848, there were revolutions that swept all of Europe. Metternich, who had established the political system after the defeat of Napoleon through the Congress of Vienna in 1815, had often said that when France sneezes, all of Europe catches cold, and that's exactly what happened. France had an earlier revolution overthrowing the Bourbons. Charles X was overthrown in 1830, and he was replaced by Louis Philippe, the Duc d'Orléans, and therefore that the period between 1830 and 1848 is known as the Orleanist monarchy or the July Monarchy. It was technically a constitutional monarchy, but it basically limited the franchise, limited the vote to wealthy and educated adult men. And this angered people so much so that by 1848, the French opposition was meeting in these political dinners that they held, and they chiefly advocated the enlargement of the franchise. That is, they wanted universal male suffrage. That is, they wanted every adult Frenchman to have the vote. This was resisted by the government. The government itself tried to close down these political dinners, and in February 24th, 1848, they tried to shut down a major political dinner advocating universal male suffrage in Paris, and that led to the streets of Paris erupting in revolution. If you've seen Les Miserables, if you've seen that play or the movie, you know what happened. The French threw out the furniture and sealed off streets. These were very narrow streets at the time, and they were able to drive Louis Philippe off the throne. Louis Philippe was replaced, the government of Louis Philippe was replaced by a provisional government that brought radicals, Republicans, and socialists, utopian socialists, to power. They set up a government, a provisional government that established, for example, under Louis Blanc, and you remember Louis Blanc, I hope that you've read about him in the PowerPoint. The Organization of Labor was his principal book. He opposed the idea of competition for the working class as a basis of gainful employment. And Louis Blanc was named Minister of Labor by the provisional government, and then he went on to set up these labor workshops, which were public works programs for the working class. This attracted many workers to Paris to gain gainful employment, and the provisional government quickly established, in addition to the assistance, the public works programs for workers, it very quickly established universal male suffrage as the basis of voting in France. One of the things that happened, though, is by March and April, the French had elections for the newly created legislature. Most radical Democrats, Republicans, and socialists believed that once the people were given the vote, once the vote was given to every adult man, regardless of wealth or education, that would ensure a victory for the left, that is, for the socialists and for the radical Republicans. Well, it didn't turn out that way. Once the votes came in from the countryside, particularly the peasants, and remember, France had not fully industrialized. It was still a majority agricultural nation, and peasants made up the vast majority of the population. Once their vote came in, it was clear that they had voted conservative. They had voted not for the restoration of the Orleanist constitutional monarchy, but they had voted for representatives that supported a return to the traditional Bourbon divine right or traditionalist monarchy. Once these people took over the legislature, they voted to end many of the programs that were set up by the provisional government. And by June, they had shut down the labor workshops that Louis Blanc had established, and that led to another wave of rebellion. But this time, the military was used to crush the rebels. That is, they came in and they basically attacked the barricades and defeated the rebels, killed a large number of them, and deported an even larger number to Algeria, which was a French colony, and then moved to restrict some of the progressive actions of the provisional government in 1848. This would lead to a presidential election in December of 1848. And that presidential election led to the victory of another Napoleon. That is, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, the nephew of Napoleon I, was elected in a landslide victory. He got 70% of the vote. He had 5 million votes in favor, and his next nearest competitor had only about 1 million votes, so he was swept into power. Louis Napoleon sets up the first modern political campaign. He was also underestimated by his opposition. They compared him to the first Napoleon and found him wanting. Victor Hugo, the author of Les Miserables and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, called him Napoleon the Little. Karl Marx basically said that history has two acts. One is high tragedy or epic tragedy, and the second act is always comedy. And he basically was referring to Louis Napoleon Bonaparte as the second act, a comic opera kind of leader. But Louis Napoleon was rather shrewd. He was able enough to bring together into a coalition members of different groups so that he gained a majority, a political majority very quickly in the game, and he was able to translate that into a political victory, which was a landslide victory for the presidency. He was able to satisfy peasants by extending credit, by representing a tradition that they had supported, that is the tradition of his uncle. He actually used his name very, very effectively. He also had used the railways, so part of industrialization, for his own benefit, because he was able to crisscross the country in on the railways and stop with campaign speeches in all of France. He was also able to mobilize